What if the richest man in the room was also the loneliest? And what if the only person who truly saw him was the woman refilling his coffee? This is not a story about money. It's a story about kindness. About what happens when two people are brave enough to see each other, really see each other, past everything the world tells them to look for. Stay with me until the end. This one will stay with you. His name was Julian Hartwell, and on a cold Tuesday evening in Paris, he sat alone in a small, unremarkable café on the edge of Montmartre, the kind of place with mismatched chairs, fogged-up windows, and a chalkboard menu that hadn't changed in 15 years. He wore a coat he bought for €6 from a second-hand shop near Pigalle. His shoes were scuffed. His watch was the kind you find in a pharmacy near the checkout line. Nobody in that café would have guessed that this quiet man in the corner booth had built a technology company worth €2 billion. That he owned properties across 4 countries. That the car waiting discreetly around the corner cost more than most people's apartments. Nobody knew. That was exactly the point. Because Julian had learned something painful over the years. Something that had slowly hollowed him out from the inside. The moment people knew who he was, everything changed. Smiles got wider. Voices got softer. Questions became carefully chosen. And every woman he dated eventually stopped seeing him and started seeing what came with him. The penthouse, the accounts, the lifestyle. So he created Mark, a simple alter ego, an aspiring photographer with a second-hand camera and a modest life. Tonight was blind date number 12, arranged through a private matchmaking service, the same way the previous 11 had been. The woman arrived in expensive heels, her smile bright and rehearsed. She scanned the café, found Julian in his worn coat, and her expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough. Mark. Her voice had already gone flat. That's me. I'm actually not feeling well tonight. Rain check. She was gone before he could respond. Julian watched her climb into a sleek car outside and exhale slowly. 12 dates. 12 exits. He stared into his coffee. She lasted 40 seconds. That might be a record. He looked up. Standing beside his table, coffee pot in hand, was Camille. She was the evening waitress. 30s, maybe late 20s, warm brown eyes, a pencil tucked behind her ear, the kind of face that looked like it had seen enough of life to stop being surprised by it. She'd witnessed his parade of disappointments for months now. Never commented. Until tonight. Julian almost smiled. Is my sadness that visible? Only to someone paying attention, Camille said, already reaching for his empty cup. Tart tatin. On me. You look like someone who's forgotten what real feels like. She didn't wait for him to argue. She came back with a warm slice of apple tart and, because it was a slow night, she slid into the booth across from him. Not intrusively. Not performatively. Just naturally. Like sitting with someone who needed company was the most ordinary kindness in the world. Tell me what you're actually looking for, she said. And something about the simplicity of that question, the complete absence of agenda in her voice, made Julian tell the truth. Someone who sees me, not what I can offer. Just me. Camille looked at him for a long moment. Then maybe, she said quietly, you've been knocking on the wrong doors. She left to serve another table. Julian sat in the warm, coffee-scented air of that small café and felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Like maybe he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He didn't know yet that kindness had just found him, and that the woman who'd offered him tart and honesty was carrying a weight of her own, one that would soon test everything he believed about who he was. Julian stopped scheduling blind dates. He kept coming back to the café anyway. Not for the coffee, which was average at best. Not for the food, which Camille herself admitted was lovingly mediocre. He came back because of the conversations. Because somewhere between her refilling his cup and sketching absent-mindedly on her order pad, Julian had found something genuinely rare. A person who talked to him like he was just a person. Over 3 weeks, he learned her story in pieces. The way you learn someone's real story, slowly, honestly, without them performing it for you. Camille was 29. She'd grown up in Lyon, the daughter of a bus driver who had passed away when she was just 20, leaving her as the sole guardian of her younger sister, Leah, who was 17 at the time. She'd moved to Paris for art school, deferred twice to work more hours, and was now finishing her degree while holding down 2 jobs, the cafe in the evenings, a small print shop in the mornings. She sketched constantly. On napkins, order pads, the back of receipts. One evening, she turned her notepad around and showed Julian what she'd drawn. It was him. Not his coat. Not his worn shoes or the coffee cup in his hand. She had drawn something in his eyes, a particular quality of loneliness that somehow looked familiar, like she recognized it from the inside. That's... Julian couldn't find the words. The real you, Camille said simply. I think so, anyway. Julian went home to his apartment that night, not the penthouse, the modest one he used when he was being Mark, and sat with that drawing for a long time. She had seen him, completely by accident, with a pencil and a spare moment. She had drawn the thing he'd spent years trying to hide. He didn't sleep much. Then one evening about a week later, everything shifted. Camille came to his table with swollen eyes and trembling hands, moving fast, not meeting his gaze. Julian reached out gently and stopped her. Hey, what happened? She sat down. And the words came tumbling out in that broken way words do when someone has been holding them in all day. Leah, her brilliant, determined, endlessly hardworking sister, had been accepted to one of the most prestigious universities in France. A near-full scholarship. The kind of letter that changes the entire direction of a life. But there was a gap. Housing deposits. Administrative fees. Costs the scholarship didn't cover. 26,000 euros. She's the smartest person I know, Camille whispered, her voice fracturing. She deserves this more than anyone. And I have to tell her we can't do it because I am short. What kind of guardian does that make me? Julian sat very still. Every instinct in him screamed to fix it. Immediately. Completely. 6 words and a phone call, and it would be done. But he had been here before. The moment money entered a relationship, everything calcified. Gratitude curdled into obligation. People stopped being themselves and started being careful. He couldn't do that to Camille. He wouldn't. How long until the deadline? He asked carefully. 6 weeks. Then we have 6 weeks to think. Together. Camille looked at him strangely. You said we. I care about both of you, Julian said quietly. Let me help you look at options. That night, from his real apartment, Julian made calls. Not to pay, that would unravel everything. But to investigate. To redirect. To quietly move pieces. He discovered the university had emergency bursary funds rarely advertised. He identified 4 private foundations with open grant cycles, and through an intermediary he trusted, flagged Leah's application with detailed supporting notes. He contacted the university's financial aid office anonymously, ensuring her file was reviewed by someone with the authority to act. He did all of it without his name attached to a single document. 4 days later, Camille practically ran to his table. Julian, Mark, you won't believe it. Her whole face was light. The university re-evaluated Leah's package. There were grants we didn't know existed. A foundation nobody had heard of. We only need 4,000 euros now. I can do that. Extra shifts, a payment plan. Mark, she's actually going. She threw her arms around him and Julian held her, eyes closed, breathing in the warmth of that moment. When she pulled back, her expression had changed. Something quieter. More searching. Did you do this? She asked softly. Me? Julian smiled. I'm a broke photographer, remember? Camille looked at him for a long moment. Right, she said. But her eyes said something else entirely. What Julian didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that Camille had been sitting with a secret of her own for 2 full weeks. A secret that was about to change everything. And a question she'd been waiting, patiently, quietly, carefully, to see him answer. Not with words. With who he chose to be when nobody was watching. 3 days after the news about Leah's university fees, Camille sat down across from Julian during her break. She placed her phone on the table between them. On the screen was an article. A financial magazine. European edition. The headline read, Julian Hartwell, The Invisible Billionaire. Why Europe's Most Private Tech Founder Refuses the Spotlight. Beside the headline was a photograph of him. Julian felt the floor drop out from under him. "I've known for 2 weeks," Camille said softly. The cafe was quiet around them. Someone clattered dishes in the kitchen. Rain tapped gently against the fogged windows. Julian opened his mouth and closed it again. "Your laptop," she continued. "You left it open one evening. Your real email was on the screen. I wasn't looking for it. It was just there. Your name. Your company. Everything." Julian stared at the table. "And you said nothing." "I was waiting," Camille said simply. "For what?" She looked at him with those steady, honest eyes that had seen through him from the very beginning. "To see what you would do. Whether you'd use your money to make me feel small. To make me owe you something. To turn my sister's dream into a transaction." She paused. "Or whether you'd just be kind. Quietly. Without needing anything back." The silence between them was not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that only exists between people who have finally stopped pretending. "You helped Leah," Camille continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Without putting your name on it. Without making me grateful in a way that would change things between us. You gave without taking." She exhaled. "Do you understand how rare that is?" Julian felt something behind his eyes sting unexpectedly. "I lied to you," he said, "for months. And I knew the truth for 2 weeks and said nothing," Camille replied. "So we were both scared. Both protecting ourselves. Both testing each other." She tilted her head slightly. "But here's what I found out." She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "The man who sat in this booth for 4 months eating tart he didn't need to eat, leaving tips 3 times the size of his bill thinking I would notice, that man is you. Billionaire or not. That's your character. And character," she said quietly, "is the only thing I've ever cared about." Julian looked down at her hand over his. This woman who had grown up with very little and given everything, who had raised her sister alone and still found room to offer a stranger warmth and honesty and free tart on a bad night. "You notice the tips?" Camille laughed, a real laugh, the kind that filled the whole room. "Julian, I'm a waitress. I notice everything." He told her everything that evening. Not in the cafe. They walked, through Montmartre, past the glowing boulangeries and rain-slicked cobblestones, past street musicians and couples sharing umbrellas, and he talked, really talked, about the loneliness that wealth had carved into him, about 12 blind dates and 12 quiet exits, about building something enormous and still feeling profoundly unseen. And Camille listened, the way she always had, fully, without judgment. When he finished, she said only this: "You didn't need to be fixed, Julian. You just needed someone to sit still long enough to see you." He stopped walking. Right there on a wet Paris street, with a street accordion playing somewhere nearby and the city glowing gold around them, Julian Hartwell, the invisible billionaire, the man who had eaten alone for months, felt completely, entirely, peacefully found. 8 months later, he proposed in that same corner booth. He tried to buy the cafe building the previous year when it faced foreclosure, not to own it, but to save it. The original owner, a 70-year-old man named Gerard who had run the place for 43 years, had refused every offer. So Julian worked differently. He quietly settled the debt through a third party and transferred the building back to Gerard for €1, with one legal condition: it remained in his family, always. Gerard never knew who had saved it. That was the point. When Julian got down on one knee in that mismatched chair, fogged window, lovingly mediocre cafe, Camille said yes before he finished the sentence. They married the following spring. Small, honest, beautiful. Tech investors sat beside art students. Old money shared tables with people who counted every euro. And at the front, in a brand new university hoodie, eyes shining, stood Leah, who gave the most extraordinary toast anyone in the room had ever heard, ending with this: "My sister taught me that kindness is not weakness. It is the most precise and powerful thing a human being can offer." And she found a man who already knew that. I think they recognized each other. At the reception, Camille's closest friend pulled her aside. "How did you know?" she asked. "With everything he hid. How did you know he was the one?" Camille looked across the room. Julian was laughing with Leah about something, completely relaxed, completely himself. No performance. No armor. Just a man at ease in a room full of people he loved. "Because he saw me first," Camille said softly. "Not my situation. Not what he could rescue. Just me. And I saw him too, the lonely man who wanted someone to want him, not his world." She smiled. "We saw each other's truth before we even knew we were looking." Across the room, Julian caught her eye. That same quiet, vulnerable smile from the corner booth. The one she'd seen through a coffee pot and a slow Tuesday night and somehow recognized as something worth staying for. She smiled back. Money had almost kept them apart. Pretending had almost kept them lonely. But kindness, quiet, uncredited, unglamorous kindness, had built them a home. And truth. Truth had made all the difference. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that how you treat people when nothing is at stake says everything about who you are, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere out there, someone is sitting alone in a corner booth. And maybe all they need is someone to notice. Like this video. Subscribe for more stories that actually mean something. And remember, kindness is never wasted. Even when nobody's watching. Especially then.